Hello. Hello. Happy Saturday. For those of you joining me live, thank you for spending your Saturday morning and or early afternoon or late afternoon, depending on where you are at in the world, with me as we explore the moon, Mars, Pluto, the Mars, Pluto. I don't know why I just said the moon. I think it's because I saw someone join called Pretty Petty Pisces, and I was like, oh, I have my moon in Pisces. Are you a Pisces sun for that person who just jumped in? The Mars-Pluto opposition and why we win when we integrate the erotic. So I'm going to just give this a second here as people hop in. You are a Pisces sun. Amazing. So cool. It's funny how my brain saw Pisces and it said moon and North Node. Very, very cool. So y'all, I want to just start by saying that I actually have a Mars-Pluto opposition in my natal chart. And learning for me about that Mars-Pluto opposition was actually kind of where I was like, you know what? I am going to make this course erotic integration part of my work, because so much of the energy of Mars, the animal body, the instinct, the action, the assertion, and Pluto, the soul, is a really big part of my personal experience. Like being able to bring those subconscious desires and awarenesses up into the body, that's a really big part of my personal experience. And so, you know, obviously, like probably many of you, I watch the planetary transits, not necessarily to say that my life is going to be defined by them, but as signposts and as markers and as touch points to be like, what could the cosmos be reflecting to me these days? And so, you know, when I started to watch this dance, this cosmic bullfight, as I like to call it, come into play, I was like, oh yeah, this is major. And, you know, usually this time of the year anyway, there's like this raw energy, this raw sexual energy, this raw erotic energy that is up, that starts to come to the surface for many of us. Why? Because we've been in hibernation and now all of a sudden it's warm, the sun is out, energy's moving, the sun moves from Taurus to Gemini. We start to just have this like, okay, it's go time. Like rubber meets the road, let's apply, let's assert, let's go. And so when I saw this this opposition come up, I was like, yeah, let's talk about this. And let's talk about this in relation to the erotic, in relation to Eros. And I want to say this, how I'm going to talk about this, I am not a formally trained astrologer. That being said, human design is built on, you know, one of the systems that it is synthesized from is astrology. And really since 2017, I have had my face in a fair amount of astrology. And so take what resonates, leave the rest. This is my personal synthesis based on information I've consumed from this incredible book over the years. This book is just like so good. Also Stephen Jeffries' 4-part series on the elements. You know, his work has been super influential in how I think of astrology. And then also Natha Campanella, she was one of the first people I took like an astrology course with. So I just want to say that this is a synthesis. This is my take. And this is my take integrated into a really big holistic web that has to do with Eros, that has to do with conditioning, that has to do with returning to our truest selves. And that pulls in a whole lot of elements, right? Like, yeah, sure, it's astrological. It's also psychological. It's also, you know, a process of deconditioning. So I have a lot of notes here because what my brain likes to do is take all different interconnection points and weave them together. And when I saw this transit hit, I was like, oh, this is so rich with interconnection, especially because we're about to start a cycle. We've already started it technically, but we're about to start a cycle where Pluto, the soul, the transiting Pluto in the sky, you have a natal Pluto that you were born with the moment you were born, boom. Where was Pluto sitting? What constellation? What astrological sign conditions your Pluto, that's going to be different unless you were born very recently than where Pluto is right now in the sky. That being said, we are all what I call under the influence of the planetary transits. As I said at the very beginning of this, that does not in any way mean that you are being controlled by Pluto or being controlled by this Mars-Pluto stare down. You're not. Are you being influenced by it? Well, that's your choice to decide. We'll unpack it right now. And like I said, I have a lot of notes here because there's a lot of interconnection points and I want to stay as cohesive and on the mark as possible because I'm not just talking about astrology, right? We're talking about the intersection between astrology and, hey, the erotic, integrating the erotic to be really specific. So if you get my newsletter, which if you don't, please subscribe to it. I want to make that more of a regular part of my offering because I really enjoy writing and I really enjoy the expression of writing. And I think this platform, while it's amazing for so many things like this, we move really fast on it. And so what I'll be doing with all my newsletters from now on is I will be writing them, but then I will also be audio recording the newsletter so that you have the audio newsletter. That way, if you're like, yo, I don't want to read all this, then you can listen to it. And the one that I just sent out yesterday, the audio was like 20 minutes and it's rich. I put some binaural beats in the background. And so it's like a little mini podcast until that gets its own life, its own legs. So let's dive in. The Mars-Pluto opposition and erotic integration. So let's start with our foundations here. That way we are all on the same page. If you have water, take a sip. I'm going to light my incense over here. I don't know if any of you follow Lori Benjamin, but she has some incredible art that's really fun and very erotic, and I am using one of her lighters. I think it's Lorelei. Anyways, let's get started. Pluto. Pluto is the soul. And I want to actually show you this lighter because it is really cool. I mean, that's a lighter, right? Amazing. Okay, so Pluto. Let's ground in. Pluto is the soul. Sometimes we hear about Pluto as the underworld god. Sometimes we hear about Pluto as like Lucifer. Sometimes we hear about Pluto as the soul wound. What I'm going to choose to speak to is that Pluto, for this conversation, is, as Jeffrey Wolf Green says, it is the soul. And the reason I say that is because I feel like Pluto being the soul implies this connection to source, right? My soul is a unique expression of source. Your soul is also a unique expression of source. And the reason I like this as a definition of Pluto is we can then find Pluto in our natal charts and go, what is my soul coming here to learn by locating the house Pluto is in and the sign it's in, and then also the relationship it has to our north and south nodes, and then its polarity point, right? The thing that's exactly opposite it. And right now, in the sky, the thing that is exactly opposite Pluto is what? Mars, okay? So Pluto is the soul, and for simplicity, we're saying soul is an expression of source. Now, the soul has a personality, it has a conscious, it has an unconscious. Essentially, it has an essence, it has an intelligence, right? Hello. And as we know, our conscious and unconscious or subconscious desires drive or color reality, how we see it and how we experience it, right? So right now, let's say you have Pluto in Scorpio in your natal chart. You're going to see the world a different way than people who have, our parents' generation, Pluto in Leo, right? So your soul, the kind of essence that your soul was pulled from to get expressed into the world now is different than other people's, but it's also kind of generational. And so what I want to start us off with here is that if Pluto is the soul and Mars is the animal assertion, it's the drive, it's the intangible animal, it's the expression, it's the aggression, it's action, and they're sitting across from each other, and they're in a stare down. Just think about that for a second. Your soul and its desires staring down Eros, impulse. Think about how it's going to feel. Think about the matador, Pluto, and the bull. And just for a second, like really let yourself just set the scene. Like close your eyes even maybe. Take a deep breath and imagine that you're in this ring. It's dry, the sun is out, you're sitting as the crowd watching this matador, this elusive, mysterious, powerful figure stare down a really powerful, a physically powerful animal. What is that going to feel like? Are your palms going to be sweating? Are you going to be feeling excitement? Are you going to be feeling anticipation? Are you feeling terror? Are you feeling curiosity? Are you feeling awe? Like actually let yourself for a second feel this. Because this is a really great metaphor for what is happening cosmically right now. This Plutonian matador with their red cape saying, let's go. Mars, show me what you've got. Show me what's there. Show me what you're willing to fight for, what you desire, your impulses, right? So this is what's happening up in the sky, and how that influences us is almost a catalyzing of our desires, our impulses, our actions, our urges up to the surface. Now here's the thing. It's our soul's desires, actions, impulses coming up to the surface, right? Pluto is unconscious. The soul, we're not consciously, like if I say to you right now, okay, Pluto is your soul. And the soul speaks the language of desire. What are your soul's desires? And if you're in here right now, seriously, think about this. Do you know your soul's desires? Do you? Like, can you, in a really distilled and crystallized way, say, yes, Alyssa, I absolutely know my soul's desires. Here they are in a formatted list, very clear and precisely. I mean, if you can, great. I can't. I can guess based on my astrological chart. I can guess based on my life experience. But for me to be super clear on them, I feel like I wouldn't be able to. Okay? So let's just think about that first and foremost. Are you actually conscious of your soul's desires? Or are you conscious of the impulses that rise to the surface, Mars, that you feel urges to act on, Mars, as opposed to those soul desires? The soul desires that, of course, exist for our own evolution. Now, if you are in here right now and you care to, just, I will not say anyone's name, pop your desires into the comment. Like, leave them. What do you think your soul's desires are? Or what do you feel as your more conscious Mars urges, impulses, and instincts that rise more to the surface, right? Mars being that animal body as opposed to Pluto being that more subconscious desire that's the language of the soul. Do you feel aware of either of those two things? And if you weren't aware of them a couple of weeks ago, in the last, let's say 2 weeks, have you become increasingly aware or suspicious of, there's something here? There's some kind of desire here. There's some kind of impulse or urge here. What could it be? Most likely, most of us know very specifically our soul's desires. We don't. Let's just be real. Like I said, we can use astrology as signposts and markers to orient us, but do we actually know them? It's a really good question, right? So this is why, in my opinion, Pluto is referred to as the underworld god. It's not because Pluto's bad. It's not because Pluto is malicious or nefarious. It's because what is the underworld? Do we know what the underworld is? Do we live in the underworld? No. The underworld is the unknown. It is subterranean. It is under the earth. It is under the body. It is under the consciousness, right? Subconscious. And so to me, the reason that we shake in our boots when we start going, oh my God, Pluto transits or Pluto energy, or oh my God, Pluto's so scary in pop astrology is because the unknown is often scary, right? Like what we don't know, we fear for the most part. We are creatures that like certainty. And our original awareness through the lens of human design is splenic. Splenic awareness speaks the language of fear, right? So when we feel fear, we go, holy shit, is this going to kill me? Is this going to take me out? Is this going to be the end? No, Pluto's not here to take us out. Pluto's not here to kill us. Pluto, if we do choose to relate to Pluto as the soul, is just subconscious. So we're not aware of it consciously. And because we're not aware of it, we fear it because it feels so unknown to us. Now, what makes us really quake in our boots when we start talking about Pluto and the unknown is that Pluto represents death and rebirth. Death and rebirth represents a process. How do you go through a process? You go through it. You experience it, right? And so that's what Pluto is inviting us to do. It's going, hey, look, the only way out is through. The time-tested cliche that is entirely true. If you stay in something, you are stagnant in it, right? There's no movement. There's no dynamism. And so Pluto's going, listen, you got to come through the underworld. You've got to explore your subconscious. If you don't, then you might be ruled by those desires, those sublimated impulses that are unconscious or subconscious that drive you. And they drive you through Mars. You know, in his book, Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul, Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about how Mars is a low octave expression of Pluto. That doesn't mean they're better. That doesn't mean they're better at all. Like Pluto or Mars isn't better or worse. But think about for a second, low octave meaning more dense, right? Think about the bull versus the matador. We would definitely say a bull is a lower octave expression of a matador. It's not better or worse. It's a different expression of energy, right? So you can feel Mars, the bull, Pluto, the matador. They're dancing. Think about a dance with another person. There's tension there. There's a literal dynamic of tension that's going to say, hey, who wins? Does Pluto win? Does Mars win? Does the matador win or does the bull win? And to me here, it's actually not about either of those things winning out over the other. To me, it's about us humans getting to use the energy of the bullfight, the human sitting in the crowd being influenced by this dance, influenced by this art form, influenced by this intensity. As we are influenced by it, we can use that influence. We can use the metaphor, return to the metaphor, we can use the above to help us to orient to and navigate the below. And so once again, as these impulses start to rise, as these urges start to rise into our awareness, Mars, and you'll know what they are because you will feel an urge to act on them. Mars is the warrior. It's assertion. It's action. It's the animal body. It's the bull, right? You wave a red cape in front of a bull. What's it going to do? It's going to act. It's going to assert itself. It says, are you fucking kidding me? You want to do what now? Right? And Pluto says, well, I want to see what's there. I want to see what's there. And the reason, and I'll get into this more after I continue through the archetypes, but the reason that I say, look, the way you win under the influence of this cosmic bullfight is by integrating the erotic, is because Mars is Eros. The Merriam-Webster definition of Eros as an impulse, as a instinct, is Eros, the sum of life-preserving instincts or impulses, right? The sum of life-preserving instincts, to quote it, that are made manifest as impulses. sublimated impulses, impulses that protect our body and mind. Go look it up right now if you don't believe me. That's Eros. Yeah, Eros is a god, sure. It's an archetype. But Eros, as we experience it, is the bull. It's the intangible animal. It's the energy of assertion. When we have an impulse, when we have something that presses us into action, that is the erotic moving through us. Then you have the matador. You have the high frequency of that, which is unconscious. And what do we know about the subconscious or the unconscious? It drives the conscious. There's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it's really great. It's a really great book. It talks about how we have like set settings of our subconscious based on, our experiences, even the power of the subconscious mind. These are both books I would highly recommend. They're speaking to Plutonian dynamics, Plutonian archetypes of, hey, listen, there are things, there are settings, there are ways of perceiving that your subconscious mind either came into this life with, right? We're talking about karma, we're talking about past lives, we're talking about the evolution of the soul. Now, you don't have to believe in those things at all. You could just say it from a purely psychological standpoint that if your subconscious mind has marinated in a specific culture, or when you're younger learned certain things, those certain things that you learn when you're younger are going to be your settings. And you're going to return to those settings over and over and over again. And that subconscious is going to impact the conscious. Again, we get the same fractal. We get the same parallel as above, conscious, so below. Unconscious, subconscious, sub, under. As above, the cosmos, so below, the microcosm. Right? So you can really see where there's so much interconnection here. The reason I say, look, we get to, as a way to dance with this energy, integrate the erotic, is because Eros is the sum of life-preserving instincts. It is Mars. Integration is to take separate things, to combine separate things and make them a unified whole. And to me, that's actually what the bullfight, the cosmic bullfight, Mars staring down Pluto, is about. It's this tension that says, hey, look, we are actually two sides of the same coin. We're not different. And that's why when I was talking about Pluto being the underworld god, and I was saying, look, when we hear the underworld god, because of our conditioning that the devil exists and the devil is an outside force from us that tempts us, we have these really subtle perceptions of Pluto, that Pluto is bad, or that it's malefic, or that it's nefarious, that it has an intention for us that is harmful. It doesn't, not in my opinion. It's unknown, it's underworld because it is subconscious. And when we think about the subconscious is unknown. And when something is unknown, it is scary because it implies a sense of uncertainty. Are we with me? Are we with me? Are you with me? Leave me a little emoji if you're with me. I'm just curious where everyone's at. And also, if you have comments, if you have your own experience, share it. So before we go any further, I want to be really clear that the two sides of this coin, the high octave Pluto Matador and the low octave, not bad, denser, Mars Bull, they're two sides of the same coin. They are polarities. They are on a similar axis, right? Now, as we said, Pluto isn't bad. It's scary because it's unknown. The soul, of course, you would never say like, oh, my soul is bad. You might be like, my soul, like that word is a little bit obscure. And because it's obscure, because I'm not really sure what's there, it's scary to me. But if we start to look at this dance between the matador and the bull, and we start to feel the bull and the impulse that the bull is, right? The bull literally acts on impulse, which if we look at the definition of impulse, it's a sudden, strong, and unreflective urge. That's impulse. Impulse is an urge. Now again, remember the definition of Eros. The definition of Eros is the sum of life-preserving instincts made manifest as impulses. So you get Mars, the bull, driven by impulse, driven by instinct, driven to go, to assert, to push outward. And then you've got Pluto underneath, coaxing, catalyzing. So what's happening right now in the sky, what's happening right now in the cosmos that we are being influenced by is this catalytic energy, this energy of transformation where the soul's desires, Pluto, are rising to the surface as impulses, Mars. Now think about that for a moment. What if every time you felt an impulse, and this is where there's nuance around impulse, right? Because, and this is something I talk about in erotic integration, it's funny, this was actually catalyzed for me through a dream. When I was creating erotic integration, I had this dream that I was laying in the Dead Sea. I've not shared this publicly yet, but I've been to the Dead Sea before, and it's haunting. It's beautiful. It's dead. It's incredible, but there's no life growing from it. And in this dream, my awareness recalled a moment of me laying in the water, but it was twilight and there were all these rocks around. And when I looked up, and I couldn't move, actually. There was a fire pillar up on one of the rocks, and like the fire was like, get out of this stagnant pond, this sea of salt that will brine you. And I could not move from the Dead Sea. And there was like a little dog statue there. And I was like, this is interesting. So when I woke up, and the dream was so vivid, when I woke up, I did some research on like the metaphors of the Dead Sea. Like, what is the archetype of the Dead Sea? And one of the things that came up in a couple different people's opinions was this axis of lower pleasures versus higher pleasures. Lower pleasures being those pleasures that give us instant gratification when we follow them. Things like scrolling on TikTok or Instagram. Things like eating processed sugar. And don't for a second think I'm judging any of this, because we are all modern humans and these are parts of our lives. But these are lower pleasures. We have impulses to fulfill these desires. Oh, I want a quick hit. And these lower pleasures, they have impulses. Now, this is why I say the word impulse has nuance to it, because those impulses, if we follow them, don't necessarily nourish us or fortify us over the long term. However, we also have impulses for higher pleasures, and this is what the Dead Sea dream that I had was essentially referring to. As I looked it up, I was like, yeah, this is going to be my interpretation of it. Higher pleasures actually fortify our biochemistry and our nervous system and our consciousness and our subconscious for the long term, right? Higher pleasures would be things that actually sustain our life force energy instead of giving us that quick hit that then in the back end depletes us. Higher pleasures would be things like listening to music, giving someone you love a hug, making a home-cooked meal, sharing food with friends, like things that actually require some delayed gratification, some work. Going for a walk in nature or a walk outside. Those would be higher pleasures. They're things that over the longer term fortify you. And so this is where, to circle back around, the word impulse has nuance to it. Why? Because we have all kinds of impulses. We have all kinds of urges and instincts. And right now, in the last 2 weeks, and probably for the next week or two, you'll probably be highly aware of some urges, some impulses, and some instincts coming to the surface of your body awareness that you weren't aware of just a couple months ago. Now, I will get into the nuance at the very end of Pluto in Aquarius opposing Mars in Leo. But I want to continue on here because as these soul desires rise as impulses in the moment or urges in the moment, that's the erotic. And what that can feel like is to suddenly become shockingly aware of these energies, of these things, of these feelings, of these body responses. And the thing to remember here is that's all well and good. And they are actually rising from the Plutonian force that is the subconscious. Mars is conscious, and so sometimes we identify with Mars. It's like in this book, Jeffrey Wolf Green refers to the awareness, the Mars awareness, conscious, as a wave that rises from the sea. And for that moment, if we put our awareness in the wave, that would be the Martian awareness, the conscious impulse to individuate. And then that would be the soul too, right? Rising from source, the ocean. And so as we move through this energy, what you might start to notice is some impulses, some desires, or what I should say, some impulses or urges rising to the surface of your body awareness. And those impulses and urges are reflective of your soul desire. They're reflective of the Plutonian force that is soul. Soul speaks the language of desire. And the reason I say this can be shocking is because this is where we start to really meet our conditioning. Culturally, most of us have been conditioned to think of things like impulse or desire or urges as unhealthy, as dirty, as lust, as bad, as things that we need to control. And because of that, we get really uncomfortable when it comes to the raw power of our bodies, right? If you've grown up saying, oh, don't lust, oh, don't, that sexual urge, you better suppress it. Oh, your appetite, you want food, oh, that's weak, don't eat. If you've grown up with a lens that says, hey, these impulses, these urges, Mars, the bull, Eros, are weak, they are bad, then your relationship to your body feedback, your body communication, Eros, is going to be distorted. When an impulse comes up, you might go back down. Actually, go back down. Actually, no, go back down, right? Because we have been taught to perceive them as bad, as negative, as the devil, as temptation, as a force outside of ourselves. And that's why I started this conversation saying, actually, those forces are not outside of ourselves. The devil is just as much you as God is. They're just archetypes that live in us. That's why we can name them. Now, as I was saying, when Mars and Pluto are in the cosmic bullfight, what happens for all of us down here on the earthly plane is that all of a sudden we start to become really aware of our desires. How? Because we're feeling the impulses, we're feeling the urges rise to the surface. And as we feel that, the part where we get stuck isn't feeling the impulse. The part we get stuck is going, holy shit, now I have to meet my conditioning. Because some of these impulses, some of these urges are actually going directly against what I've been conditioned to believe is okay, what I've been conditioned to believe is healthy. And this is where stuff gets a little bit sticky, because when we come face to face with our conditioning, because we have an impulse, we have an urge, we are the conduits of Eros after all, right? Our bodies. When we have that come up and that impulse or urge goes directly against our conditioning, what do we do? What do we do when the desire starts to be made manifest as an impulse? And all of a sudden, the stern voice of our condescending conditioning comes online and says, who the hell do you think you are that you should follow that impulse? Who do you think you are that you should try for that? Who do you think you are that you can hold that much aliveness in your body? Who do you think you are that you can wear that? Who do you think you are that you can drink that glass of wine? Who do you think that you are that you could take that risk? Who do you think that you are? That is inappropriate. That is not safe. That is not okay. The nerve you have. And this is why I'm saying the Mars-Pluto cosmic bullfight is a catalyst for transformation. Because when these impulses rise to the surface, that is not the end of the dance. That is not the end of the dance. It's what we do with the impulse. It's what we do with the energy. It's what we do with what is up from the subconscious, Pluto, as a body impulse, Mars, that we feel like we want to act upon. And remember, like I said, there's nuance to the word impulse. I just talked about it. You can go back and watch this. I'll put it on YouTube and I'll also put it, I'll save it. But it's actually what we do with the impulse that matters, right? And this is why there's tension. This is why there's tension. Because, for example, let's say that the Mars impulse that's arising in you, and for those of you who are just coming in, hello, Mars being the bull, Mars being the force, Mars being the action, the thing that rises to the surface, and Pluto being the matador, the subconscious that coaxes the thing up in the first place. Let's say you have a Mars impulse to have an affair. You've been in a long-term relationship, it's getting boring, and you have this impulse to have an affair. Do you act on the impulse? Or do you follow the Martian, the bull, the Mars impulse down deeper into the Plutonian soul and say, what is this impulse actually trying to tell me? What is this impulse to have an affair, as an example, trying to tell me? Oh, through the Plutonian lens, through the soul's desire lens, that impulse to have an affair is probably telling you, you need more aliveness. You want to feel alive. You want to feel passion. You want to feel connection and expression and sensation. Is having an affair the only way to do that? No. But you might have an impulse, Mars, to do that. Now, I don't want to paint Mars in a bad light, but I do want to paint it as the animal body. It's quick, it's assertive, it's here, it's now, it's I will go. Go, I will do, I will act. You can always, and this is what we do in erotic integration, when we get comfortable with this energy, when we learn the fluency of it, and we'll get to that. But what we do is, instead of following that Martian impulse, that Mars impulse to have the affair, you go, I know that Mars is a lower octave expression of Pluto. It's not bad. It's just more dense. It's the body. Pluto's the subconscious. So I'm going to follow that impulse I have for an affair down into the Plutonian subconscious realms and go, oh, you know what? My soul's desire is actually just for more aliveness. My soul's desire is actually to feel passion and to feel connection and to feel intimacy. And that's missing from my relationship. And so then what we do is we bring that Plutonian subconscious soul desire that was made manifest as a Mars impulse. We bring it to the surface and we say, shit, this is going to be hard. But you know what? It's time to have a conversation with my partner, my long-term partner, about how I need more aliveness and more expression, right? Let's do another example. The Mars impulse, let's say, to rebel against your boss. Your boss goes, hey, you gotta go do that. And you feel this thing in you and you're like, fuck you. I don't have to do anything you say. Now, Mars isn't always bad, but that's an impulse, right? It's a self-preserving impulse. If you, for example, let's actually go back for a second. That impulse to have an affair, even though affairs aren't fun, they hurt people, there's no transparency there. They're usually, rising from a place of need, yes. But let's just say, I don't want to make Mars bad. So that impulse, remember, Eros is the sum of life-preserving instincts made manifest as impulses, Mars. That impulse is actually life-preserving. Everybody knows what it's like to be in a soul-sucking situation. It's horrible. You feel like you're dying. And that's what this cosmic bullfight is doing. It's going, look, There's some places that you have been avoiding looking at because they're scary. Because if you look at them, you're going to find some things you didn't know about. You knew about them in your subconscious. But that Mars impulse, for example, to have an affair is actually life-preserving. What I think of when I say life-preserving is aliveness-preserving. Your soul wants to evolve. It wants to have experiences that enrich it. And for some people, it's okay. We're all on different evolutionary journeys. None is better than the other. But for some people, you might not feel that. And you might be like, actually, I'm totally contented in this relationship that's kind of stale. And for others, they might feel that need for aliveness get expressed as the impulse for an affair. And then you get to choose what you do with that impulse. Do you follow it back down to the deeper Plutonian realms? That's fluency. That's, to follow the surface impulse back down to the subconscious Plutonian realms when you integrate the erotic. Because all of a sudden, the erotic isn't a force that's outside of you. Those impulses and urges aren't temptations from the devil. They're a part of your body, a part of your conscious and subconscious that's going, hey, maybe you should pay attention to this. You know? So let me give you a couple more examples of Mars impulses that you can follow into Plutonian, deeper subconscious settings. The Mars impulse to rebel against your boss, as I was just going to say. That literally might feel like, yeah, I'm conscious of this impulse to rebel. Well, okay, is that actually going to get you what you want? Or if you can follow that Mars impulse to rebel against your boss deeper to the Plutonian subconscious soul level, what's there? Well, there might be a need for the reclamation of your personal inner authority, right? Actually, I don't want people to tell me what to do or make my decisions for me. I want to assert my own authority. Is rebelling against your boss going to get you what you want? Or is it just an impulse that's indicative of those Plutonian subconscious soul desires that's getting brought to the surface and made manifest as an impulse to rebel against your boss, right? That's not going to actually do anything good for you. What will do something good for you, and this is why Eros is life-preserving, is if you can follow the Mars bull down into the subconscious Plutonian matador and go, oh yeah, down here, there is actually a soul need, a soul desire to reclaim my sense of inner authority, right? Rebelling against your boss isn't going to help you reclaim your soul authority, your soul's desire, your inner authority. But that might be how the impulse expresses itself. And that's why I spent so much time at the beginning of this talking about how Mars is, through the words of Jeffrey Wolf Green, the lower octave expression of Pluto. I totally can see that. Totally can see that. Mars is the bull. It's the body. It's the instinct. It is how we express the subconscious as it becomes conscious, an impulse that we get moved to act Mars on. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do two more. Let's say you have a Mars impulse to flake on plans, right? The impulse is like, I'm just so exhausted. I don't even want to go. I'm just going to not show up and I'll text them later and make up some excuse. That's a Mars impulse. The impulse is, I gotta flake. Okay, are you going to take it for the surface impulse? Oh, I just had to flake. Or are you going to follow the impulse deeper to the Plutonian soul desire, the subconscious, which is, hey, actually, I have a soul desire, a need for more alone time. Easy, right? And this is where if we can just start to see that as above, Mars, body, impulse, so below, subconscious, Plutonian, soul, desires that of course imply the need, the path of our soul's evolution, right? If you're someone who has an impulse to flake, it's probably indicative that you are not having a need met, that need being enough alone time. So let's do one more. The Mars impulse, right? Mars, body, the bull, go, action. The Mars impulse for a quick jerk off to porn. If you can follow that deeper, and again, we don't ever want to demonize the Mars impulse, because impulses are life preserving a lot of the time. They're usually, if we can follow the impulse back down, they're usually indicative of a soul need, of a desire that we are feeling on a surface body level. So if you have that impulse for a quick masturbation session or jerk off to porn, can you follow the urge back down to the Plutonian subconscious realms that says, actually, you know what? I think my soul has a desire to explore the erotic. I think my soul has a desire to explore or play with kink. I think my soul has a desire for more sexual expression. And this is just the easiest way to express the impulse, the bull, the lower octave, more dense expression. Wave the red cape, and what does the bull do? Charge. It doesn't think, it just goes. That's its instinct, right? None of it needs to be demonized. Like, the instinct doesn't need to be demonized. The impulse doesn't need to be demonized. The Plutonian subconscious should not be demonized. These are all parts of us that work in our favor if we choose to integrate them, right? To take separate things and make them part of a unified whole. And this is why, when I was talking about conditioning earlier, our conditioning really fucks us up. Because it's like, oh, you're so bad. You had that impulse to masturbate to porn. Poor you. You're horrible. Bad, bad, bad. Well, actually, no. If we can follow the Mars impulse that is brought up in the now that says act, if we can actually follow that down into the subconscious, then it will illuminate for us, hey, actually, you have a desire for more sexual expression, more sexual exploration. Maybe you want to play with kink. Maybe you want to explore the dynamics of BDSM. Maybe you want to try new things with your partner. What is the actual soul desire? Because it exists. It's just that it is subconscious. And Mars, the Mars impulse, is conscious. Yes? Are we getting this? Is this landing? I'm gonna have a bite of some chocolate. If anyone has questions as you are in here, please feel free to ask. This is not a sponsored ad at all, or any kind of an ad, but if you've never had this chocolate, it's so bomb. It's so good. So good. Okay. So now that we've walked through a bunch of different examples of how impulses, those right now up in the body, impulses, drives, urges, Mars, can be followed down to the Plutonian subconscious, which the subconscious correlates with the soul. Soul speaks the language of desire. Desire is what drives an impulse, right? That subconscious, that soul, that's the Pluto force. And yes, you can find this in your own birth chart. But now that we've just walked through all of those examples, Mars impulse, follow it down. That's essentially how we use our animal bodies, our intangible animal, our instincts. That's how we use them for our soul's evolution. And that is the core of erotic integration. The core of erotic integration is not so that you can be some kind of a lover that's like, oh, I'm the best lover in the world. Yes, you're going to have way better sex if you integrate the erotic. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is to go, right, the devil does not exist outside of me, and nor does God. They're both archetypes that exist within me. And if I learn how to see that they're both different sides of the same coin, I can actually utilize them for my favor. I can actually take advantage of both of them. And this is what being fluent in the language of Eros looks like, sounds like, feels like. Is you don't just take the surface impulse and run with it in a blind way. Unless the structure is there for you to do that. The structure that feels healthy, that feels vibrant, that feels like it will fortify you. But fluency here means not mistaking those Mars-born impulses as random or as all there is. They're not. They're surface level expressions. They're surface level expressions of the subconscious, right? Mars, surface level expression of the subconscious. Pluto, the subconscious being reflective of part of the soul. The soul speaks the language of desire, and that language of desire is what manifests as an impulse. It's what manifests as an urge. And that is the erotic. The erotic isn't random. We would never evolve by experiencing life if we didn't experience impulses. When we can understand what our impulses are trying to push us toward, when we can understand the instinct of the bull and how it's actually trying to cater to and make us have experiences that serve our soul, subconscious, Pluto, that serve our soul's evolution, then we can really start to take those impulses and right away follow them back down to the subconscious, follow them back down to what's happening in our soul process, in our soul's evolution. Does anyone have questions? Okay, since there are no questions, I'm going to finish this out here. So right now, to distill what we just talked about, we are experiencing a very clear tension, a very clear energy of impulses and urges, Mars, that we are being called to act on, that are arising from Pluto, the subconscious. They're coming to the surface. If you are just joining in, I just gave a bunch of examples. I will save this. I will share it on YouTube and also on my Instagram, so you can go back and listen. The examples are really helpful because they'll show you how to take the impulse and follow it back down to the subconscious, Pluto. So this planetary energy influences us to transform. How does it do that? Well, it asks us to become aware of, it doesn't even ask us, it just makes us aware of our impulses and our instincts. And when we can follow those impulses and instincts back down, we can start to feel what our soul curriculum is. We can start to feel our evolutionary needs. We can start to feel our desires, the soul desires, and we can then learn how to transmute, to change, to transform those impulses if they're not going to serve us, right? If they're more reflective of what we talked about earlier, those lower pleasures. I'm just going to go quick jerk off to porn, which again, no judgment. It's an impulse. The bull just acts, right? So we can learn how to transform those by integrating them, by being like, you know what, that's a part of me. That's a part of me that lives in me. That's a part of me for a reason, right? So we can learn how to integrate them. And this is why I say, how do you win the cosmic bullfight? And I will go to your question in just a moment. Thank you I super appreciate the questions. The reason I say integrate Eros, the way to win as a spectator of this cosmic bullfight, the way to win is to integrate the erotic, is because when we can see those impulses and those instincts, the ones for sex included, as more than just about reproduction, as more than just about getting off or orgasm, as more than just about an appetite, and we can see them as indicative of deeper soul level needs and desires for our transformation, for our evolution through this life, we can use everything that comes up, everything that we experience. Okay, I'm going to pause on closing this out for a second and just say there's a question. How to not demonize but love what was previously considered dirty or bad, Eros? It's a really good question. I imagine the loving of it is a communal development. Okay, this is a really good question. Thank you. So, how to not demonize but love what was previously considered dirty or bad? 1, have your own experience of it, right? So this is something in the coursework of erotic integration. I start with the first 2 modules are all about deconditioning. They're all about going back into our experience and reflecting on what we've been taught overtly and covertly about sex, about impulses, about urges, about our bodies, about our expression. Because oftentimes, again, and I would super recommend the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind. I haven't read it in a handful of years, but that book made me realize how malleable our subconscious mind is, especially when we're young. And one of the things that they tell a story of is this concept of what we call autosuggestion, not autocorrect, autosuggestion. And they tell a story of 2 different circumstances. 1, this guy is a captain on a ship. Every day he gets on the ship, every day he works this ship. And one day a passenger on the ship comes up to him and he says to the captain, "Wow, you're looking pretty sick right now." And the captain looks at him and he's like, "Fuck off, I don't look sick." The guy walks away. The guy finds someone else on the ship, a passenger, never been on a boat before. He's terrified. And this guy says to the new passenger on the boat, "Wow, you're looking pretty sick." And the passenger, who's never been on a boat and is terrified to take the journey on the boat, goes, "Oh my God, I do? You know what? I'm starting to feel pretty nauseous and yeah, wow, oh my God," and runs to the bathroom and goes and gets sick. That's an auto-suggestion. So if, the captain already has an idea of his relationship to the ship, and he's like, "I don't look sick, I'm on this boat every day. Get out of here." But the vulnerable, malleable passenger believes, his subconscious believes the thing that the guy says and accepts it as truth, and then his body has a response to it. That's autosuggestion. And so what I have clients do is actually go back and reflect on what suggestions, what auto-suggestions have been given to you about sex, about experiencing the energy of aliveness, about experiencing the energy of the erotic. Because when you can do that, just that alone, never mind all the other things we can do, you can actually learn to see how outside perception, how conditioning has actually really influenced your perception of eros, of sex, of sexual energy, of flirtation, of aliveness, of lust, of love, of sexual expression, of sex energy. And when we can do that, just that alone oftentimes illuminates a lot about whoa, some of these ideas I have about sex, some of these beliefs, some of these kind of internal body structures or responses, they're not actually mine. And as soon as we can do that, that alone helps us to perceive eros as not dirty at all. Not dirty at all. But it shows us how our conditioning comes in. And so then second to that is to have our own experience of it. And this is why I talk about self-pleasuring, and I talk about it a lot because yes, you can have partnered sex, of course, but the more we can meet eros, the more we can meet ourselves in those very open, intimate, vulnerable spaces and places, the more we can really learn for ourselves, what does this feel like for me? If we can be intentional and deliberate and breathe into it and be here with it, what does it actually feel like for me? Does it feel dirty? Does it feel bad? What does it feel like for me to go masturbate to porn and have my kind of awareness outside of myself versus to just masturbate or self-pleasure with myself, breathing into my body and actually feeling my own experience, right? So there's lots of nuance here, and I love this question because really to me it's a 2-phase thing that happens, and both phases happen simultaneously or parallel. Have your own experiences and then decondition as you have your own experiences. Let yourself question. chocolate coming back to bite me in the ass. But seriously though, this chocolate is amazing. It has little pieces of coconut in it that are very chokeable, but we're gonna go with it. So that is how, and that is a process. That is a process because anytime we've been conditioned to demonize something, there's guilt and there's shame and there's fear that comes up when we experience it. And I can speak to that personally. I can totally speak to that personally, especially with sex. I think a lot of people can speak to that personally with a lot of different things, whether it's, self-expression or wearing a type of clothing, and so this is where, to me, when I talked about Pluto and I talked about how Pluto is feared because it's the unknown, and it's not just the unknown that exists randomly out there, it's the unknown that says, hey, if you want to transform this, if you want to take this from a place that's dirty and demonized into a place that's brilliant, life force giving and clean and beautiful, you got to actually go through it. You do. That's why Pluto is scary, because Pluto asks us to move through a thing. And so, move through the things that scare you and do it soberly and do it deliberately. Something I say to female-bodied humans all the time is like, if you're afraid to not wear a bra because people are going to look at you because your nipples are going to change and they're going to get hard, but you want to be more comfortable in your body, that's going to be a hell that you have to go through. Go to the grocery store without a bra on. That's how you decondition. You have your own experience, and then you hold your own experience against your conditioning, and you say, what's mine? What's my conditioning? That's the age of Aquarius. That's Pluto right now, and we'll finish on that, but that's Pluto. I mean, we're not finished yet. We're not finished yet. But what we're going to circle all the way back around to as the period is that Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto, the underworld god, is in the sign. It's being conditioned by the sign that says, hey, you got to individuate. We have to individuate here. Because if we don't individuate, we're a homogenous blob. And if we're all, to your point, a homogenous blob that demonizes sex and says it's dirty, then we're going to repress the impulses, and then we're going to get taken by them when we can't repress them any longer. Or we're not going to get to experience the aliveness, the fullness, the depth that impulse could have led us to should we have followed it to that subconscious soul desire. So have your experience and decondition simultaneously. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? And I'll give it a second here. If you have a question, please leave it. But thank you so much for that question. That is fire. And like I always say, questions are really helpful. Because we all have different perceptions. We all have different experiences. None are better than the others, but they're different. And so when I say something like, oh, take the impulse and follow it down to the subconscious, you might be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Whereas for me, as someone, as I said at the very, very beginning, I have Pluto opposing Mars, the same setup that's happening right now. I have it in my natal chart. It's a part of my essence. So I really understand this energy because it's part of my experience. They're in different signs. My Pluto's in Scorpio and my Mars is in Taurus. Right now, Pluto's in Aquarius and Mars is in Leo. But I understand this energy from an experiential place. So if you don't, ask me questions, because that's what I'm here for. So that's why I say that the way to win as we're under the influence of this cosmic bullfight is to integrate Eros. Is because if we can see our impulses as more than just a surface level, as more than random, and we can see them as, super good question. We can see them as indicative of something that's deeper and something that's part of the curriculum of our growth, then we can learn to work with them. And when we can learn to work with them, there's a beautiful grace that starts to emanate from us and into our experience where we're like, it is what it is. It is what it is. Cliche? Absolutely. Does that feeling create a sense of resiliency? Yes, it does. Why? Because that grace where we go, oh yeah, that impulse, it's actually life-preserving to me. I just need to interpret it through a lens that fortifies me so I can understand what the need actually is. That creates less resistance. more resistance equals what? More stress. And more stress equals less health. So when we resist, there's more stress. When we have more stress, we are less healthy, we are less resilient, we are less adaptable, we are less alive. And so you can really take this very big in the holistic sphere, in the holistic lens, and say, yeah, cool. If I can learn to not resist my impulses, but translate them into the language of soul needs, if I can learn to feel erotic energy not just as like some uncontrollable animal lust, but as an orientation to my soul's needs for its evolution, then all of a sudden there's a lot less resistance. There's more ease, and more ease means less stress, and less stress means more thriving. Okay, question. How does Pluto win the bull's consideration in the moment of a strong, in the moment auto-suggestion? Oh, I love how you're like running with the metaphor. All right, let me think on this for a sec. How does Pluto win the bull's consideration in the moment of a strong, in the moment auto-suggestion? Okay, so this is where I would say practice. We need to be practiced in the energy of the matador, which is not to shame the bull, but not to make the bull wrong, not to aggravate the bull, not to say that impulse, that low octave animal instinct is wrong or bad, but to see it as correct, but to also see it as not all there is, right? And to know the energy, to be so intimately familiar with that feeling, right? Like, go back to the last moment that you felt the bull inside of you. Go back to the last moment where you felt the animal instinct rise in your body and you were like salivating for something. We don't want to make ourselves wrong for that. We want to actually experience it. But we want to experience it in such a way that it feeds our soul. And so to me, the way that Pluto, the way that the matador actually could subdue the bull or get the bull's attention in a way that is not violent or not condescending, is for us to see that all the parts of ourselves are correct. All the parts of ourselves are there for a reason. And to me, that's what Pluto is trying to show us. It's like, hey, you've got to go through it. The only way out is through. You have to experience it. You have to feel it and understand it in order to alchemize it. And so when we start adding then auto-suggestion in, to me, auto-suggestion is conditioning. So to me, really all it is the choice. And this is where, in the metaphor, it's really just the choice. Do I stay in the energy of the bull? Or do I know that the bull has a front and every front has a back, to quote Stephen Forrest, the astrologer? Every front has a back. The matador is just the back of the bull. So to me, they're actually not different energies. So the bull might take the surface level, the auto-suggestion, and go, oh yeah, what I'm told is true. That impulse is bad. Okay, let me act a different way. Action, Mars. In the moment of auto-suggestion, can we tap into our subconscious? Can we tap into what's actually happening a little bit deeper than the impulse and consider, does that actually match my experience? Is my true experience that sex is bad? Or did I have an experience when I was young that was super uncomfortable that conditioned my subconscious to think sex is bad and then have a body, Mars, the bull, response to sex that is aggressive or assertive or protective or scared? Does that feel like it answered your question? And then if not, I'd love to hear your take on it. But really, I think the way that you do that is just by seeing that the bull and the matador are one and the same. They're one and the same. They're the same energy. They're just a different side of the spectrum of the energy. They're not different at all. Mars and Pluto to me are not different. They just are expressed in a totally different way, right? Every light has a dark. Every yin has a yang. Every front has a back. Every up has a down. Every above has a below. They imply each other. And that's where, that's actually what happens when we integrate the erotic, is we see that Eros implies something deeper, but we can only do that by experiencing it and deconditioning our experience. And that's where, I'll always bring it back to this, but that's where human design comes in, because we never think We never think to question our experience unless we know that we can. We never think to question the autosuggestion unless we know that we can. And that's where we also don't want to make the autosuggestion wrong. Because maybe to that person, we did look sick. Maybe to that person who believed that thing, Eros was dirty. Maybe that person had an experience that really shocked them, right? Like when we look at like some of the biblical take, obviously aside from like the book of Song of Songs, which Solomon, I think a lot of the biblical implication that sex or Eros is dirty or wrong was actually a way to try to get people to not spread sexually transmitted infections or diseases. I think it was just a function. It wasn't a spiritual morality thing. It was like because you go back further back, and we have like, the temples where sex was a worship act. So there's just so much nuance, and where we've arrived now is that a lot of us have just been taught to take it at surface level, take it at surface value. And I like your question because it does speak to that front back, that binary. These are the same energies, but we have to see the metaphor, not just the surface, in order to really understand them and know how to use them. So, by knowing that Pluto and Mars are same but different, the front and back of the same coin, we absolutely, positively can learn how to dance with them, can learn how to use them for our own evolution. And as we move through the next really handful of years, more than a handful, it'll be a significant amount. Right now, Pluto is in Aquarius, but it's retrograding back into Capricorn for a handful of months, and then it will come back into Aquarius and it will sit there for a long span. And right now we're getting a taste of that. Pluto in Aquarius is the soul's desire. Pluto is the soul. Soul speaks the language of desire. Desire gets transmuted, into impulses. So Pluto in Aquarius is the soul's desire to individuate. Why would the soul want to individuate? So that it can decondition, so that it can strip off all the auto-suggestions, all of the layers that don't serve it, and in doing so, return to its own unique genius, its own rarefied frequency. So that when it comes into the collective, which Aquarius also implies, along with genius and rebellion and individuation isn't an endpoint. We're about to enter a 400-year cycle of individuation starting in 2027. But, really starting now. It started already, in my opinion. Individuation isn't the endpoint. The endpoint is to take the individuated human, and then have that individuated human return to the collective or return to their community with their own unique skill sets, genius, energy, essence. And then we have Mars across from Pluto and Aquarius. Hello. Mars in Leo across from Pluto and Aquarius. And Mars, as we've talked about, is the impulse or the urge to express yourself when it's in Leo. And that's, Leo is expression. It's the sun. It's self-expression. And it's not just self-expression, but it's self-expression that's witnessed. So right now, that's why this is so up. Right now, Mars, it's not just like, oh, Mars is, in Cancer and it's subliminal and it's self-nurturing. No, Mars is in Leo. So Mars wants to be expressed. The sign conditions the planet. Mars wants to be expressed. And it's sitting head to head with Pluto and Aquarius. Aquarius conditions Pluto to say, hey, the soul needs to individuate. The soul needs to individuate so that it can know its own unique genius and then bring that into the collective. And so right now, collectively, we are under that influence. It's a really transformational influence because a lot of impulses are going to come to the surface and you are going to have the urge to express them. And the question is, can you follow those Mars bull impulses back down to the subconscious to get clear on how they can serve your soul, how they can serve your soul's evolution. Okay. Any questions? I'm going to give it about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to continue on with my day. So for anyone who just came in, do you have questions? And Andrew, thank you so much for yours. Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Has anything been confusing? Has there been any dissonance in what I'm saying? I wrote about this in depth yesterday, because to me, this actually is the energy of erotic integration, and we're all collectively under it. And I know that a lot of people have had things coming into their awareness that are challenging. And I think if there's one thing that we can do that's incredibly powerful for ourselves is to stop perceiving Pluto, the underworld god, as bad or nefarious. Pluto is the soul. And the devil is part of you. I mean, Rick Ross, what does he say? The devil is alive. Yeah, the devil's alive. It's alive in me, and it's alive in you. And when we turn our face to that, when we try to not see that, did I just quote Rick Ross? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. When we turn our cheek to that and we're like, oh no, the devil doesn't exist in me, that is the opposite of integrating the erotic. All right, I'm gonna head off now. A couple updates for those of you who are curious about how you can work with me, how you can dance with me. And thank you for the questions again. Number one, the least committal way you can work with me is by getting a human design reading. That is a 3-hour downloadable reading that is personalized to you. And then we have a 1-hour Zoom session where we integrate that information. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, you can drop in with me with erotic integration. And we will dance with this energy way deeper than we just did, right? But we need to integrate the erotic in order to be whole humans. That way we have our own fucking experience and not an experience that someone said, this is the right way you do it. There is no one right way. And if we integrate the erotic, we start to feel that those bull-like impulses that are action-oriented are indicative of something deeper. And we can use that something deeper for our own evolution. Whether it's the hottest fucking sex you've ever had, or a sense of self-study, a sense of self-confidence, a sense of self-knowing. That is usually about a 14 to 16 week experience. There's a ton of information there. There are recorded modules. All of those recorded modules have binaural beats laced in the background. There are energy experiments for every one of the 7 modules. There are guided visualizations. There's guided breath and movement. And then there's 4 hours of one-on-one sessions. We'll also integrate your human design in that because human design speaks to quite a lot of sexual and interpersonal patterning. If you are like, Alyssa, that sounds great, but I actually am hungry for the entire feast, then you can jump into a one-on-one Magic in the Mundane container with me. And that does include access to erotic integration. That is a 6 month to a year, depending on what you choose. You can do a 6-month process. You can do a year-long process. None of my one-on-one offerings are short because you have to have experiences in order to integrate information. If you can just know information, cool that you know the information. Until you experience it, you're not going to actually know it. You're not going to actually embody it. Okay? All the time people are like, oh, can't I just do a one-off with you? No, you cannot. If you've worked with me in the past, you can. But you cannot just come in and have a call with me. It's not going to do anything. It might give you some insight, but I want you to have insight and embodied experience. So that one-on-one Magic in the Mundane container, the 6 month to a year option, we ground entirely into human design. So human design becomes our jumping off point. Why? Not to define who you are, but because human design is a system that gives you a strategy to decondition. That's why. When you start to follow your own inner authority, you learn how to decondition. It's an experiment. It's not a belief system. And so we use human design to ground into, to bring you back into what is actually your fucking truth, and your truth based on your experience. And when you can do that, holy shit, do you feel empowered and do you feel alive? And then on top of that, we will weave nourishment. My OG training as a dietitian, yes, I still move people through nourishment. Because listen, you can have all the spiritual knowledge in the world. If you're not eating, you're going to feel horrible. If your basic needs are not met, thank you, Maslow, you're going to feel pretty bad. So that one-on-one magic in the mundane container is the magic, but we touch the magic through the mundane. We ground into our bodies. We make sure they're fed. We make sure they're slept. We make sure they're sexed. We make sure they're hydrated. We make sure they're moved. We make sure they are expressed. We return you back to the authority that is yours, rather than looking outside of yourself for authority. And that's the process of deconditioning. You move through erotic integration. You get access to rhythm, embodied eating 101. You have access in that magic in the mundane container to over 30 hours of coursework, in addition to 9 altogether, 11 hours of one-on-one time with me. Live. Every session's recorded. You can go back. You get a human design reading. They're usually about 2.5 to 3 hours. It's a lot of resource. It's a whole curriculum. And I will schedule you and pace you on it. And you will get, between call time, access to me on Signal. And then you can jump into Rhythm Eating 101 on your own. And you'll get access to me on Signal for 4 weeks if you do that, just for nutrition, just for nourishment. Or you can join me and Rivka here in Colorado if you are a female-bodied human, which we will be opening retreat space for men and women, but we have some structural shifts that we need to make in a space we need to find first. That's going to be for that. So August 31st through September 5th, you can join us here. If you're like, Alyssa, I want to feel you in real life before I commit to working with you, come to the Eliminatrix retreat. We have 7 spaces left. You can absolutely, positively share a bed with a sister, a mom, a daughter, a friend, whoever. That's a really good way to bring the price of the retreat down. And that is here in Colorado, August 31st through September 5th. We'll start every single day with yoga. Rivka's flows are so amazing. You will leave feeling like a new human being in your body. We will spend the midday workshopping. We'll workshop human design. We'll workshop deconditioning. We'll workshop the erotic and integrating it. We'll workshop, returning to our own inner authorities. We'll workshop really like embodiment, and then we'll practice it in embodied photography sessions. We will spend every single evening doing what I like to call a nightcap, an energetic nightcap. That will either be dancing, a yoga nidra, a guided visual. And in between those time spaces, you will have very deliberate integration time, because that's important, especially when you are in a group. So that is that. Thank you to everyone who joined me. Like I always say, and I fucking mean it, if you all don't exist in my life and in this community, what I do actually doesn't really matter, except for my gratification of getting to express myself. So thank you for your trust. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, see you.